Bon dia. Welcome to you. Thank you for getting up early to come in here and join us for what promises to be a very exciting day about innovation, about open innovation, not only here in Barcelona, but across the world. I'm thrilled to be able to start the day off to share with you some thoughts about open innovation in general, and then I thought I would take the time to share with you how we might use this model to address some of the new challenges that we face in sustainability. And then after my speech, we'll bring up a panel of corporations that themselves are doing venturing activities with small companies, embodying some of the ideas of the open innovation model, not just in a book, but in their day-to-day business activities. So let me begin my remarks with introducing to you a more traditional view of innovation to anchor the model I want to share with open innovation. The beginning model I want to share with you is a company's research and development process that I've shown here as a funnel, turned on its side. And in this funnel, ideas and projects move from the science and technology base of the company through into the marketplace. And you'll notice I call this a closed system. And the reason I call it a closed system is that in this model, there's only one way into the process from the science and technology base, and only one way out into the market through the company's own channels and business activities. So keep that property in mind. Only one way in, only one way out. One of the companies that I studied at close range that was practicing a version of this were the folks at Xerox Corporation, and in particular their Palo Alto Research Center, or PARC. And this I'm showing you now is a document from the company from 1996, and it represents their funnel. And each of those ovals in this diagram is a project in the R&D lab. Now you see some additional things that you didn't see in my original model. One thing you'll see is that there are three ways out into the marketplace. Not only the Xerox business, but also an internal incubator or a licensing and spin-out path to the market as well. So three ways out. On the inbound side, you see these lines that cut across all those projects in the company's laboratories. These were stage gate or phase gate reviews. And at each of these stages, the company would review the activity in the project and decide, should we continue or should we stop? And in interviewing the people managing those reviews, I learned some information you don't often hear about these stage gates. And that is, we don't have all the information when we make these reviews. These projects are new. They're still very young. There's a great deal that we don't know. So we have a lot of underlying uncertainty and incomplete information. Under those circumstances, when you make an evaluation of a project, you're going to have measurement error, what statisticians would call the type 1 false positive error or the type 2 false negative error. Now, a type 1 false positive error would be a project that gets to one of these reviews, passes the review, further work is done with the project, it gets reviewed again, it passes that review, goes on to the final review, passes, goes into the marketplace, and fails. That's the false positive. So obviously that is a very expensive error for managers to make in reviewing these projects. And they were very aware of this and wanted to reduce that chance. But what Xerox did not think about, and what many companies don't think about, is the risk of a false negative evaluation. This would be a project that gets to one of these reviews, gets reviewed, and it fails the review. No further work is done, no further funding is provided at that point. So how does the company know if this project could have been successful if it had continued? There's no further work and funding, so there's nothing to observe. This is where my research began with the company. My research started when the internal funding for these projects stopped. And then across 35 projects, I asked what happened after that, outside the company. And so I came to the understanding that Xerox was trying to minimize false positives, but was ignoring the false negatives. And what I found in my research is summarized in this diagram for you here. Most of those 35 projects did not succeed outside the company either. So we might say they were true negatives. They were not successful inside, they were not successful outside. 10 of the projects, however, that went outside became very successful companies. Companies like 3Com in Ethernet networking, Adobe in PostScript technology and Acrobat, and 8 other companies. And when you add up the market value that these projects turned into as independent companies, that's what this graph is showing you. The red line is the market value of Xerox. The white line is the market value of these 10 projects summed up together. And you can see in this graph that by the middle 1990s, they surpassed the market value of the company they came from. By the end of the period of my study, they were more than twice the value of Xerox itself. So on average, these projects failed. But the few that succeeded were worth so much that they were worth more than all of the corporation Xerox itself. And so the message is, as we think about innovation and evaluating these projects as they march to the marketplace, there may be real value in these false negatives. And what those false negatives need are other paths to the marketplace. And to give them those alternative paths, we need a different model of innovation, a model I would contrast to the one I started with in my remarks to you. This is an open innovation model. Still a funnel turned on its side, so that looks the same. But notice that there are some differences now. One difference is we bring ideas and technologies into the R&D process, not only from our own science and technology base, but also from outside ideas and technologies. These could be universities, research institutes, small firms, individuals. There's a wealth of information out there to make use of and innovate with, and companies need to open up to access more of that information. The other difference you notice is that when we get into the funnel has holes in it now. So projects can move in or out of the R&D process within the company throughout the innovation journey. And this means we can find other paths for these ideas to get to the market, even if they don't fit our current business at the moment. Another way to represent this was shared with me by a gentleman named Bengt Jarhult from SCA, a Swedish paper company. You can't read this, but it says at the bottom, "Stolen with pride from Henry Chesbrough," and Bengt has given me permission to steal it back and share it with you. Here's how he represents the open innovation model. You have the funnel aimed at your current market to start. Then you drill holes in the funnel. And with this funnel that has all these holes, you have different pathways for how ideas and projects can move from the science and technology base out into the marketplace. So as a result, many of these false negatives in a company like Xerox could find new paths to the marketplace through these other ways to go to the market. One example of a company that's been very effective in implementing these ideas here in Europe would be Philips over in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. What I'm showing you here is a picture taken in 2003 of the company tearing down the fencing around its high-tech campus in Eindhoven. And this is a view of the campus, an aerial view. You can see the perimeter of the campus, but no fencing exists anymore. Anybody can go into the campus from any point around the campus. And as a result, what used to be exclusively a Philips facility is now shared with more than 7,000 people from more than 75 companies. These companies include other corporations, they include research institutes, consultancies, local economic development partners. They've really created an ecosystem on the same physical facility that used to be restricted only to Philips personnel. So this is a very tangible way that a company like Philips has opened up to make much more use of external ideas and technologies in its own business. Another aspect of Philips opening up is not only bringing things in from the outside, but a lot of its own projects are being taken to the outside through incubation, through corporate venturing, through licensing and spinning off. And so there are many ways for projects to come into Philips, and there are now many ways for these projects to go out into the marketplace. Another example is a company that's not so popular in the US these days, BP. And BP had a challenge back in 2006 trying to develop renewable fuel sources. And the problem the company had is that biofuels looked like a very attractive opportunity to the company in their strategic review. But this company of more than 100,000 people only had 3 biologists on their staff. So you see the problem. There was a huge gap in the knowledge they were going to need. They could have simply funded research at universities, but they said, you know, that's not going to work because the university research is too small scale, and we need big results we can really commercialize. They could have just created an internal corporate lab, but they said, no, that's going to take too long, and there's too much happening out there that we need to participate in, and if we have a lab that's just internal, we're going to miss too much of that. So what they did instead is they created a new institute called the Energy Biosciences Institute at UC Berkeley in California. And most of the funding and most of the work is being done in the public domain, shown in that blue box. And alongside that, there is a BP facility on the Berkeley campus where they're doing private research as well to try to commercialize and get value from the public research that's being done. So by funding a lot of public work, BP is rapidly learning a great deal about this emerging field and contributing to new knowledge in the field for everyone. And then by having a private component, they're also finding ways to figure out where they're going to be able to capture some of the value in this new area of biofuels. And one of the things that might occur to you is, under such an arrangement, who owns the intellectual property? And the resolution of that in this context is, in the open domain, it's owned by the university to manage or license or publish as they wish. On the private side, it's owned by BP. So they've split the intellectual property this way. Now, these are ideas in open innovation are not simply for high technology companies. Another company that's been very effective in opening up its innovation process has been Procter & Gamble. And Procter & Gamble itself has a very strong science and technology base in its own history. But more recently, the company has developed a number of processes to bring in ideas and technologies from outside as well. One I'll point out here are the technology scouts that you see on this graph that are P&G employees from their R&D staff. So this is not the purchasing organization. These are R&D executives out working with other companies, looking for possible projects that could be brought in in collaboration with their partners to P&G to create new businesses from outside of P&G. Another example here is in Catalonia. The very famous restaurant I'm sure is familiar to all of you, El Bulli. While you all know the cuisine, I want to share with you where some of the ideas for the cuisine came from. Of course, Ferran Adria is the proprietor, the genius behind El Bulli. But the ideas that became molecular gastronomy did not originate with Adria. Rather, they originated with a French physical chemist named Hervé Thys. And Adria worked with Thys to learn and absorb some of these concepts of using molecular level interventions to affect the taste of different kinds of foods and scents. And with this, he brought these ideas into the restaurant at El Bulli and made El Bulli the laboratory to develop and commercialize some of these ideas. And on the business side, El Bulli has a number of partnerships with other companies where El Bulli is taking its own understanding of food and experiencing relaxing, enjoyable sensations and using that in partnership with these other companies in a variety of other businesses, whether that be oils, coffee, NH Hoteles, and so on. A very different thing for most restaurants to do. So it's really quite innovative, not only in the food, but also very innovative in the business model of the company. So does this mean that internal R&D is now obsolete? Absolutely not. Open innovation is not a model to outsource and get rid of your internal R&D organization. Far from it. In the open innovation model, your own intelligent, smart people are extremely valuable to you because they can connect to all the other smart people who aren't part of your organization. And that is a great way to begin to build these collaborations and explore these opportunities. Your people, however, do have a new role in innovation they did not have before. And this is a role to connect to, communicate, and work with the people outside your organization as well. And that means they've also got to develop a new skill. And that skill is the integration of the internal activities you have with the external activities of others. And putting these pieces together is an extremely valuable skill in a world of open innovation. So with that, let me shift to looking at open innovation in the context of the issues around sustainability. Many of us here remember the conference in Copenhagen just 7 months ago, trying to develop the successor to the Kyoto Treaty to try to restrict CO2 emissions. And I think it's widely agreed that the conference was largely a failure. They weren't really able to sort this out. Part of the problem was getting countries to sign up to hard targets to restrict their emissions. But the other problem was in the developing world, where most of the growth in CO2 emissions is going to come from, they need the advanced technologies to limit the growth of CO2 emissions by using the most advanced, most green technologies possible. But the companies in the advanced economies that own these technologies want some compensation for sharing these technologies with the developing world. And that became a second really critical issue in the Copenhagen discussions. How are we going to get the advanced sustainable technologies to the places that need it the most? Now, there are some attempts to try to address some of this. One is the Eco-Patent Commons that was formed a few years earlier. And the idea here is contribute patents to a public domain for everybody to use. And by making it open and public, this would be a way for the developing countries to have access to these technologies. This is a very good idea, but after 2 years, they only were able to achieve a contribution of 95 patents from different companies. So it's not getting enough contribution of technology to really solve this problem. So working with some other organizations, there's a group called the Green Exchange that is developing a more open innovation flavor of this kind of idea to try to create a pool of intellectual property that can be shared with organizations in the developing world. So as a way to provide this means to transfer the green and sustainable technologies that are being developed to the places that really need them. So this is a number of organizations that you see here that are involved in the activity. In the interest of time, I'll just let you read that. I won't go through each of the participants. But the idea that's different from the eco-patent commons is that the companies themselves can control the terms on which their technology is shared with others. So if you think about patents in a company, most companies only have a small portion of their patent portfolio that are focused on sustainability patents. And these patents are not all equally valuable to the company. Some of them are very, very important. We might think of these as core patents. Others, however, might be important to partners, suppliers, customers in the business, but are not really core to the company. And a great many more are probably neither core or important. And the idea in the Green Exchange is you can manage these differently. You can guard the core patents very closely if you wish. You can share selectively and specify the terms on which you will share the important patents. And then the patents that are not important to you can be specified to be shared more widely. So the company contributing the intellectual property has more control over the use of its green and sustainable technologies. So the hope is they will contribute much more than those 95 patents contributed over 2 years into the earlier eco-patent commons. And this is being done with Science Commons and gives you an example of how this might work for a material transfer agreement. So here you can see you can specify the terms to say you can use it for research, you can allow others to use it under your supervision, and you're allowed to publish your research results. You need no special permission to do that. Should you wish to do more, you then go to the terms and conditions below where you have restrictions by the field of use, clinical use, or selling. In those cases, you would need to contact the company for a commercial license. And the nice thing is the company looking at this information can know at the outset, here are the things I'm allowed to do, here are the things I must first negotiate before I'm able to do them. And they'll know this across all of the technologies in the green and sustainable pool. So to restate what I said a moment ago, businesses are in control of their intellectual property under this model. They are the ones who meter and restrict or enable others to make use of their green technologies. And there are a lot of business benefits under open innovation for companies to do this. Of course, there are publicity benefits, but there are real hard-nosed bottom-line business benefits that go well beyond publicity. One is that when you share your technologies more widely, you may actually be able to lower some of your own costs of some of your inputs. Because as more people use these, particularly in the developing world, their costs to sell to you may go down. That may be a direct business benefit to you. You also might be able to establish new standards that will take technologies in a direction you would like to see them go by contributing them openly for others to use. That's a very nice way to stimulate more research and more investment in areas that you would like to see advance to support your business. So these are real business reasons to participate. So as I hope I've shared already, we've got very good private reasons for companies to do this. We don't need to wait for governments to negotiate out the new successor to the Kyoto Protocol for this to take effect. This can happen and is happening today. The Green Exchange was first introduced in Davos this past January and is off and running now. In addition, the developing nations really have an opportunity here as well. From the outset, they can see what's available and on what terms it's available at no cost to themselves. And even if they decide to use something and they want to pay a commercial license for doing so, they can say, I only want to use it in this industry for this field of use. So they don't have to buy all the rights to a technology, just enough rights to do what they want to do in their situation. So that allows them to have a much lower cost of accessing this technology. And then finally, the developing countries themselves are going to innovate and create more green and sustainable technologies as well. And those have an opportunity to join the Green Exchange and then be shared with others in other developing countries as well. And so the cycle can continue. Now, having said that, we don't need to wait for governments, but policy can be very helpful here. There are things that governments and policymakers can do to try to stimulate the more rapid adoption of this approach. One thing is to help provide more information about the technologies that are available. Governments themselves often have green and sustainable technologies they could also contribute into this pool. Another thing that could be done is when a useful technology is identified in a developing country, there could be a program to provide some technical assistance to transfer the technology and bring it up into production in that local environment. So that tech transfer work could be supported by some government assistance. A very valuable additional thing governments could do would be to award prizes for some of the best green technologies, perhaps some of the most downloaded, the most utilized technologies across the pool. And you might also provide tax incentives for companies that do contribute patented technologies into the pool, that they get some recovery of some of their costs of developing this technology that was being contributed. And that might be a further incentive for some of these companies to participate more actively and more quickly getting into the pool. So these are some of the ideas inspired by open innovation and also open business models, that we're not only changing the way we bring ideas and technologies into the market, we're also innovating the business models that we use to commercialize these ideas. So thank you very much for your attention, and we'll move now to our corporate venture panel. And let me invite our corporate partners to come out on stage and join me now. Thank you very much.